Imagine being a 12-year-old girl, sold into a political marriage that will determine the fate of an entire nation. You're thrust into a world where your childhood is stolen before you even have the chance to understand what's happening, and your body is forced to carry the weight of dynastic power. Now imagine being pregnant at 13, about to give birth to the future King of England. The tragedy of Lady Margaret Beaufort is one so dark, it reads like a medieval horror story, one of betrayal, pain, and a woman's impossible struggle for survival in a world that used her as a mere pawn. What if I told you that this wasn't just the story of an unfortunate woman? It was the foundation of a dynasty that would change the world forever. And what if I told you the brutality of her story is still hidden beneath layers of history? This is the tragic tale of Lady Margaret Beaufort. And trust me, you've never heard anything like this before. Margaret Beaufort was born in 1443 to a noble family, but her early years were far from typical. Her father, John Beaufort, was a man of notable lineage, but his death when she was just a toddler would set the stage for the most horrific events of her life. By the age of 12, Margaret's life would be a series of cold, calculated decisions made by the men around her. She wasn't raised in a home filled with love and care. Instead, she was a political tool, manipulated by a system that saw her as nothing more than a means to an end. Margaret's inheritance, her bloodline, and her connection to the royal house made her a highly sought-after commodity. And like so many noble girls of her time, she was married off for political gain at an age when she should still have been playing with dolls. But what makes Margaret's story so haunting wasn't just that she was a pawn. It was that the men who controlled her life saw her as disposable, something to be used and discarded once she had fulfilled her role. At just 12 years old, Margaret was married to Edmund Tudor, a man nearly twice her age. This wasn't a marriage of love. It was a business arrangement, a way to solidify political power and claim royal blood. Margaret was barely a child, and Edmund, a man who should have known better, was forced into a marriage that would break her physically and mentally. When you hear the word marriage, you might picture something romantic, something sacred. But in Margaret's case, marriage wasn't about love. It was a transaction. A marriage contract signed in the blood of her youth, one that robbed her of the innocence she should have had at such a young age. Edmund, despite his power, had his own personal ambitions. This marriage wasn't about her. It was about what she could provide. And Margaret, at just 12, was already a tool in a high-stakes game of power. But it didn't end there. Edmund's sudden death from the plague left Margaret not just a widow, but an even more sought-after asset. She was already pregnant with his child, the future King of England, but her struggle had just begun. Margaret's grief was overshadowed by the cruel reality that her body, already a battleground for survival, was carrying the future of an entire dynasty. Margaret was pregnant with her first child at the age of 13, which in itself was a terrifying prospect for any young girl. But what made this situation even more tragic was that Margaret was still very much a child herself, her body hardly ready for the immense physical challenge of carrying a child. Pregnancy at such a young age was an incredibly risky ordeal, a harsh reminder of the dangers medieval women faced during pregnancy, where survival was never guaranteed. In those days, childbirth wasn't just a natural process, it was a potential death sentence, with many women not surviving the ordeal. You might assume that a child bearing a child would be an extreme rarity, but in Margaret's world, it was tragically common. The medieval period was exceptionally cruel to women, particularly young girls who were thrust into marriages they didn't fully understand and pregnancies they had no control over. In a time when women were viewed as property and their bodies controlled by the whims of others, many found themselves trapped in the merciless cycle of forced motherhood. For Margaret, this was her reality. While her pregnancy would ultimately result in the birth of Henry VII, England's future king, it nearly cost her life. The physical toll of the birth was nothing short of brutal. Margaret survived, but her body was forever marked by the trauma she endured. The aftermath of childbirth at such a tender age was far from over. The scars, both physical and emotional, would stay with her for the rest of her life. The traumatic experience of giving birth so young was just the beginning of Margaret's struggles. As she recovered, She found herself not only dealing with the pain of her body, but also trapped in a world of relentless surveillance, political scheming, and the constant pressure of raising a son who would one day become king. Margaret was forced to navigate a treacherous world where her every move was scrutinized, and her role as the mother of the future king came with burdens that no child should ever have to bear. Margaret's son, Henry Tudor, would eventually become Henry VII, the first monarch of the Tudor dynasty, but his path to power was anything but smooth. In fact, it was paved with struggle, conflict, and constant battles for survival. For Margaret, motherhood was far from the quiet, nurturing experience one might imagine. Instead, it became an ongoing war, a battleground where every day was filled with immense risk and uncertainty. Every decision she made, every step she took, held immense weight. Her survival, both physical and political, was never guaranteed, and the repercussions of any mistake could cost not just her life, but the future of the entire nation. The birth of Henry Tudor marked a pivotal turning point in English history, not just as the arrival of a future king, but as the beginning of Margaret's endless struggle to navigate the treacherous political landscape of her time. Her son's birth may have signified the promise of a new era, but it also brought Margaret into the heart of a complex and dangerous world where she was not just a mother, but a key political figure in a world full of power struggles, shifting alliances, and betrayals. As a woman, her every action was scrutinized, her every choice under constant threat. One wrong move could mean the difference between securing her son's claim to the throne and losing everything. What's often overlooked in the story of Margaret Beaufort is that she was more than just a woman born into a cruel set of circumstances. She was a fighter, a survivor. Despite the overwhelming odds stacked against her, her youth, her gender, and the many enemies she faced, Margaret fought relentlessly to carve out a future for her son, and in turn, for England. She wasn't merely raising a king, she was shaping the destiny of an entire nation. Margaret's strength, resilience, and unwavering determination made her a crucial force behind the rise of the Tudor dynasty. It was her willpower that helped secure Henry VII's throne, making her legacy not just one of motherhood, but one of political genius and enduring influence that would echo throughout history. Margaret's story is not just one of tragedy, it's a tale of unparalleled resilience and immense strength. As a mother, she was forced to play the long game, carefully and tirelessly working behind the scenes to secure her son's claim to the throne. This wasn't simply about motherhood, it was about survival in its most brutal form. In a world where power was the ultimate currency and where women had few rights and even fewer opportunities, Margaret's ability to navigate the intricate and often dangerous web of court politics was nothing short of extraordinary. She wasn't just a mother trying to protect her child. She became a master strategist, an advisor, and a critical player in the political struggles of her time. In an age where women were often sidelined in matters of power, Margaret rose above her circumstances, proving time and again that she wasn't just a pawn in the game of thrones. She was a queenmaker, wielding influence from behind closed doors and shaping the future of England with every decision she made. Despite the constant betrayal, the heart-wrenching heartbreak, and the physical torment she endured throughout her life, Margaret's story is ultimately one of triumph over adversity. She faced immense personal and political obstacles, but her unyielding will and determination allowed her to not only survive, but to thrive. Her son, Henry VII, would go on to establish the powerful Tudor dynasty, and Margaret's legacy would be imprinted on the course of England's history for generations to come. Through her strength, intelligence, and unparalleled political acumen, Margaret Beaufort didn't just give birth to a king. She helped create the foundation for one of the most significant royal families in history. Her bloodline continued to shape England's fate long after her death, leaving a legacy that would influence the nation's destiny for centuries. Margaret Beaufort's life is a story of unimaginable hardship, one that's too often overlooked in history books. Her early marriage, the birth of her son at 13, the constant pressure, and the political intrigue. This was the life she was forced to live. But through it all, Margaret never gave up. She persevered and ultimately became one of the most influential women in English history. Her legacy is not just about being the mother of Henry VII, It's about her role in shaping the future of England and her ability to survive in a world that sought to break her. Margaret was a woman who overcame tremendous obstacles to secure her place in history. Her strength, resilience, and determination should be remembered as a defining part of England's history. So the next time you hear about Lady Margaret Beaufort, remember, it's not just a story of a woman who gave birth to a king. It's the story of a woman who endured unimaginable pain and hardship, who fought for her son's place in history, and who, despite being crushed by the weight of a cruel patriarchal system, managed to build a legacy that lasted centuries. This isn't the story of a helpless victim. It's the story of a survivor, a mother, and a woman who changed the course of history. If you found this story as disturbing, fascinating, and shocking as I did, make sure to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more historical truths that textbooks often leave out. You won't believe what else we've got in store.